really bizarre, excuse me, really bizarre exchange on CNN during the coverage of the tornado. It was Wolf Blitzer and the survivor of the tornado in Oklahoma. Watch.
Such a sweet little guy.
Yeah.
All right, well, you're blessed.
Yeah.
Brian, your husband, is blessed.
Brian.
Anders is blessed.
Brian.
Yeah, Brian. You like Brian, huh? That's your
Yes.
dad. But we're happy you're here. You guys did a great job.
Yeah.
And I guess you got to thank the Lord, right?
Yeah.
Do you thank the Lord for that split-second decision?
I'm actually an atheist.
Oh, you are. All right. Don't thank the Lord. But you made the right call.
Yeah. We are here, and you know, I don't blame anybody for thanking the Lord.
Of course not.
So.
Good for her. I'm going to make a statement here before I make my observation. I really like Wolf Blitzer, and I think he's a really good man. But I've done radio and television long enough to know that question was peculiar the way it was stated. Even for Wolf, who I think is a religious man, just wasn't natural. It seemed forced. When everybody came into the office today, they said, you know, do you see that? It was weird. And I mean, I'm a believer, and I wouldn't ask the question that way. It's not as nefarious, perhaps, as you might think. I want to tell you what my theory is on this. I think he was fed some information about the guests they had on beforehand. That's what producers do. Given some questions that he should ask, etc., etc. Some producer who is sympathetic to the atheist plight or just doesn't like Christians or whatever it is, thought it was important to point out that in the middle of the heartland in America, where most people are God-fearing, there are atheists there too. Doesn't have to be nefarious. Don't think for a second it's not a big deal to them. In fact, one of the news blurbs written about the exchange, the commenter said, "When was the last time you saw an atheist on national news?" I'd like to point out, every time. They just don't say it. It's important because it informs others what they are being taught about atheists from atheism and the bully pulpit and other sources of bias that is not correct reflection of reality in plain view. Okay. We are not fighting against flesh and bone. We are fighting the forces of spiritual darkness. And it doesn't matter what people's intent are. I will tell you that that was there for a reason. When faced with a life that could slip out of your hands at any moment, most Americans cry out for help from God. Some people don't. Penn Jillette wouldn't do it. I mean, if he was hanging on for dear life by his fingernails, he'd be thinking it through, and the last thing he would do is call out for God because he didn't believe in him. He's not a fraud. But most Americans are just lazy. They believe in God, but then they're lazy and they just don't cry out to him unless they need help. And if you need proof of that, remember how full our churches were post 9/11. And then what is important here is look who we were when we turned back to God. The results were spectacular. We were our best selves. We need to put others ahead of our own self. There are those who are not merely content with not believing in God. There are others trying to steer others away as well. And that's the difference. I want you to look at this interview from this morning. Watch.
I remember the little voice saying, "I love you, Miss Crossfight. Please don't let me die with you." I'm like, "We're not dying. We are not dying today. Quit saying that." And I did the teacher thing that we're probably not supposed to do. I prayed. And I prayed out loud. What did you say? I said, "God, please don't take these kids today."
Not what she's supposed to do in a time of crisis. Completely natural to cry out for God, for somebody who believes in God. What does it say about us when we have to apologize for doing what our natural instinct tells us to do or what we think is right to do? When that happens, you are living in an upside-down world. Thankfully, there's good news. You are not allowing them to turn it upside down. The light is growing. On Monday night, I tweeted that Mercury One was taking donations to help those impacted by the storm. We left for Oklahoma, and by the radio the next morning, 12 hours later, it was just over $100,000. It's now $1.2 million. I was listening to a pastor on the show last night, and he made me think. I want to ask religious leaders and you, what have you done with your responsibility and your position that you hold? What have you done with the light that you have been given and you claim to recognize? What have you done with the power that you recognize as a son or daughter of God? What have you done that woman who is talking to Wolf can't do? Have you done anything? If you behave and you don't behave any differently. You're not really set apart. You don't act any differently. You're just the same. That's an issue, isn't it? I like atheists. I like Penn Jillette. I have the gospel. He thinks it's laughable. And maybe it is laughable. Unless he looks at me and sees something unique and says, there's something about him. And if it's that book, that's fine. But have I done anything this week? Have you done anything that would make anyone say, wow, what is it about them? I want to be like that. I want to be able to provide hope to others in dark times. If you haven't done anything different than what an atheist can do this week, then your light is not shining very bright at all, if at all. I challenge you from here on out to ask yourself, what have I done today, or what have I done in the last week? What have I done that atheists can't or won't? Because quite honestly, if there is no difference, I mean, wouldn't you rather stay at home on Sunday? Wouldn't you rather just go ahead and just do whatever you wanted to do and not listen to some invisible guy in the sky? And quite honestly, if you're not strong in that, when real trouble comes, your light will blow out.